Well, thank you very much for doing this today with us. Really,
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be on.
I know it's something that we've been trying over the last couple of months, but during the COVID-19, etc., we were not able to make it happen. But here we are, and we do have our guests joining. So I would suggest to wait for 2-3 more minutes.
Yeah, no problem.
To introduce you, Anthony, I would like to introduce you. Probably you know Suzanne Modaris, who is the Vice President of the Association of Foreign Correspondents and a UN correspondent, professional journalist. And also Bricio Segovia is our chair in DC on behalf of the Association of Foreign Correspondents, and he's a White House correspondent for Voice of America. So here we are, and we want to say that we really appreciate the whole, the full support you've been showing to the foreign press and to the foreign journalists in the United States, and that you acknowledge the role that the foreign journalists play in the U.S. media industry.
Where's Jack Dorsey and Donald Trump, Thanos? Are we not going to have those guys debate tonight? No? Leaving those guys out of it?
They're pretty busy today, I think.
All right, just checking. I thought,
kind of inevitable.
I thought we were going to have a surprise visitor.
Still working. They're still working on the executive order, I think.
They're still fact checking each other.
Right. I'm just gonna, since we're recording, I'm with, supporting the First Amendment. So wherever we fall on that, I don't know. I just think.
Well, listen, I mean, I support the First Amendment as well. I think it's a very tough thing for Twitter because you've got, you have to give him a platform. He is the leader of the free world. If he's going to lie on the platform, the question is, are they required or feel responsible to do the fact checking? And so it's tough because if you read through their guidelines, they're telling people that they will ban you or knock you off Twitter for fake news, false information, lies, all of that type of mischief. But now you have the leader of the free world doing it. And so then you have to ask yourself, what do you do? So it's a tough one, but I'm sure that Jack Dorsey consulted a lot of First Amendment lawyers and constitutional lawyers to try to come up with what the right answer is. And I noticed that he was quite selective in terms of what he was picking. He didn't go after the nutso conspiracy theory related to Joe Scarborough, but he picked something that was actually related to our democracy, which is mail-in voting and the accuracy and lack of fraud in mail-in voting. So it seemed like he was being pretty selective there, which I applaud him for.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Susan. I'm a big fan of the First Amendment. That's what got me in trouble with Mr. Trump. I wrote an op-ed last year around Easter, saying that the press is not the enemy of the people. You could find that on thehill.com. The president called me Easter Sunday to yell at me, which I thought was odd because it wasn't Greek Easter, Thanos, but it was Catholic Easter. Mm-hmm. And he said that I was wrong, and that I said to him, well, don't you want the moderates and independents? And he said something that you should all listen to. He said that he was going to focus on the base, and then he was going to let everything else take care of itself. And so everything he does, there is a strategy. If you think it's impetuous and you think it's just full-blown lunacy, it's not. It's sort of controlled lunacy. And there's a lot of strategic thought to what he's doing and how he's saying certain things. He's really trying to gin up certain people. The stuff about Obamagate is, I think it's in the category of birtherism. That's on the racist card that he's playing very hard to try to get that base up. But here we are.
Before the introduction, Susan, because I know you and Bricio, you both prepared some great questions for Anthony. Let me share that today with us is also some of our board members. Down kissing, down hello. We also have Nancy Pragel-Kamel, our chairperson for scholarships. Hello, Nancy. We also have Momoe Ban from Nikkei. Hello, Momoe. And we also have Alex Sengura from LA. He's our board member from Los Angeles. Hello, everyone. I want also to say to all of our guests that each one of you will, be able to ask any questions you want to Anthony. But let's go ahead first with Susan and Bricio, and we take it from there.
Great, thanks, Thanos, and thank you everyone for joining us for this conversation with Anthony Scaramucci. I know all of you know him, and he doesn't need an introduction. He is an American financier, entrepreneur, and political consultant. You may remember that he briefly served as the White House Director of Communications in 2017. He wears many hats, including being a mentor to young entrepreneurs, regular media contributor, and hosted his own show on Fox. He is the author of 4 books, which we will talk about a couple of them today. They offer great advice related to our discussion today about crisis management and in general, what we're discussing. And as a graduate of Harvard Law, he went to work for Goldman Sachs immediately after graduation, before finding the investment firm Skybridge Capital. So thank you so much for speaking with us, Anthony. It's great to have you. These are such.
You didn't mention my babysitting skills, Susan. So I'm currently locked. I'm currently locked. I'm locked in the attic. I'm hoping my wife will let me out of the attic at some point. They throw food through the door here, but they do let me babysit the 6 and 2-year-old once in a while. So. And I'm apparently a very cheap babysitter. I don't get any hourly wage for it, but
I mean, talk about crisis management in the time of COVID. That is top of the list. Childcare, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, listen. I mean, I guess I'm going to butcher these lines, but Dostoevsky said that a decade can pass in 2 weeks, and so if you really think about what's happened to the world, a decade has actually passed in a few months. We've watched the world change. It's going to be a cultural change. It will be a business change. It'll require all of us to think differently about our businesses, about our personal safety, about our health. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of 9/11 in New York City, but this is not 9/11 for New York City. This is sort of a national disaster, international disaster. It's it's affecting 4 billion people that live in the northern hemisphere of planet Earth. And so with that, I'm hoping that everybody puts that in their frame of mind, that the way we were living prior to this is over. And so if you can come to grips with that, I think you have this sort of mechanism in your personalities when we grieve things or think about things. It's an acronym in America that we call SARA. It's shock, anger, rejection, acceptance, help, And so I'm already through the acceptance of it and moving into the help stage. President Trump is still in the shock and anger zone. He's upset about what happened to him. He doesn't really care that much about what happened to everybody else. But, and that's sort of where we are. So if you're a crisis manager or you're running a business, for me, we got walloped in March. We did pretty well in the beginning of March. And by the 3rd week of March, my portfolio was down about 20%. So the first thing I did was I called a conference call for my clients. I did 3 in a row. And I told people the brutal and very ugly truth of what happened to our portfolio, why it happened, how we're repositioning the portfolio to hopefully resurge and make a recovery, which thankfully is now starting to happen. But point being is you got to get the facts out there, and you got to get the facts out there in a hurry. And one of the things that the president did was he wanted to see if he could do what he's done for 50 years, which is curve the facts towards him and curve the reality towards his reality. So he started out with, it was 1 case, we had it under control. It was 15 cases going to 0. It's the flu. I'm sorry.
Right.
And it's going to go away by April. You can't handle a crisis like that.
Yeah, if everyone can mute their microphones for now, I think we won't get any sound coming in because we're also live on Facebook. Most of our members are correspondents and journalists, the majority foreign correspondents working here in the United States. You're very familiar with the media landscape here in America. I guess, everyone's being furloughed. Not everyone, but a lot of people are losing their jobs. They don't know what the next move is. There's a lot of uncertainty in the air. And I guess from your experience, what can journalists and broadcasters do to claim their space in a post-COVID world, or to rephrase it, maybe turn this crisis into an opportunity for themselves?
Well, listen, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so I would recommend to everybody that you have to start to think about yourselves as your personal brand and your own business and who you are and what your brand represents. And every one of you's got great writing skills. And so there's a lot of unknowns in the world, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety in the world. And journalists have this wonderful intellectual curiosity. So the more you can write about making sense of what's going on in the world, the bigger opportunity there is for your brand. So for me, things sort of got haywire for journalism and media and publishing after the introduction of the iPad. It felt like that was the breaking point. 2010, you saw this massive fragmentation, proliferation of blogging, and lost attention span for core media, magazines like Forbes and Fortune and places like that. The eyeballs sort of just scattered everywhere into more specific interests that people have, as opposed to those generic interests. I'm looking at a lot of young faces here. So some of you probably don't remember when the television had 5 or 6 channels. We had in New York, we went from 2, skipped over a few channels, got to 13. Some of them were local channels and some of them were network channels. And there were only 3 networks. And so, when Walter Cronkite was on the news, he had a tremendous viewership. But now, with 24-hour news and 5 or 6 different news agencies, the viewership for the evening news for the networks is down substantially. It's still, I think, profitable for them. And I still think there's an interesting subset of viewers there. But, you talked about my hosting of a television show. I hosted Wall Street Week for the Fox Business Channel. Louis Rukeyser hosted that show. His peak viewership was after the 87 stock market crash. It was that Friday. He did it every Friday night. The market crashed on the Monday. And on a public broadcasting station in 1987, he got 4 million viewers to watch that show. I got my peak viewership at the Fox Business Channel when I was hosting it was $80,000. And I got a congratulatory note from President Bill Shine of the Fox News Network. Point being, things have splintered, things have scattered, but it's still there. The content is multiplying, but the curiosity and the digestible news is there. Some of you may know who Graydon Carter is. He's a acquaintance of mine. I can't say we're friends, but he just is delivering every Saturday morning an email that he calls airmail. It looks a lot like the old Vanity Fair, and it has a lot of very interesting content. So, the great thing about where we are right now in our civilization is if you've got an idea, you could go out there and you could create content and you could create a site. Some of you may know Mark Halpern. Mark Halpern has been part of the cancel culture. Again, I'm not being righteous or sanctimonious or judgmental. I'm just bringing his name up because he's been canceled off the networks. He had an issue related to the Me Too movement. And so he's out there right now writing something called The Wide World of News. And it's a very interesting business model. It's freely accessible and it's freely available. But if you want to make a donation, he'll accept it, and he'll take it on PayPal or Apple Pay and so forth. And, according to him, he's done quite well. People have made those contributions. So to me, I think you got major opportunity out there in every crisis in my life. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of them. If you're having a bad day or you're having a bad month in quarantine, I want you to think of me getting fired from the White House on July 31st, 2017. I'm lit up, blown into Pennsylvania Avenue. I made a foolish mistake with a reporter that I trusted. That's my fault. I don't blame anybody other than myself for making that foolish mistake. I'm blown into Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm lit up in the international news. I'm lit up in the New York tabloids because of what's going on in my personal life. Thank God my wife and I were able to patch it up. But the point being is, if you're having a bad day, pick up the phone, call me. I'll give you some coaching. I'll give you some counseling, because you can get through anything as long as you have your health and your sense of humor. You know, when I got on the Stephen Colbert show 6 or 7 days after I was fired, he was like, "Hey, did you think you were going to last a long time?" I'm like, "Well, I thought I was going to last longer than a carton of milk in the refrigerator." I mean, I didn't think I was going to get blown out that quickly. You know, the point being that you got to own your stuff and you got to roll with it. And so if you've been let go or furloughed, or you've got anxiety about it, try to dial into a different zone in your personality, which is the zone of gratitude. You know, sometimes we play the victim in our lives and we say, "Oh, geez, you know, this should have gone right for me. That should have gone right." I have 5 children. 3 of them are adult children. I say a lot of curse words, as you guys know. I mean, some of those curse words ended up on CNN and got me fired. But one of the curse words in my family is not a 4-letter word, but it is the word ought. That's O-U-G-H-T. If one of my adult children is saying the word ought to me, time out, don't say it. I ought to have gotten a 28 on the ACT. I ought to have gotten into this school. My teacher ought to have treated me this way. Well, that's not how the world works. The world is an is-based world. It's not an ought-based world. And when you can take yourself out of that frame of mind and you can recognize that the world doesn't owe you anything, and so therefore, definitionally, you cannot play the victim or have a pity party for yourself, but you can get up in the morning and you can write down all the great things about your life. You know, there are great things. Everyone on this call has access to the internet. So right there, you're ahead of the majority of the people on the planet. So write down all the great things that are in your life and get going.
Anthony,
And when you're having a bad day, you know, what are you going to do? It happens. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna hand it to Mauricio, who's gonna remind you of the White House in just a second. But yeah, I totally second that. Gratitude over fear, absolutely. And you know, sometimes we think if we're grateful for what we have, we're just gonna have more of that. That's not the case, but that is another conversation. I totally agree. Mauricio, you want to know what's happening in the White House and in communication?
We're talking communications, Anthony. Thank you for being so open about all these crises that you mentioned. You said that you had several crises throughout your life. You mentioned the crisis that you had to go through when you were let go from the White House. And I want to ask you, not from the political point of view, but from the communications standpoint, what are those key points that you would identify in a communication crisis when someone, a journalist or who is working in a firm or say in an institution, that could be the White House, for instance, what are those key points to deal with a communication crisis? This pandemic is a communication crisis, or ended up being a communication crisis as well that, for instance, the White House is dealing with. What are those key points to have into account on how to solve this crisis?
I can only give you my opinions. You know, here's what I would say to you. Like, you guys, you know, we're in a totally different world. We're in a social media world. We have a Zoom app where we can dial into each other, even though we're living in our houses. You have Instagram, you have Facebook, you have a multitude of different platforms. There's literally no privacy. There's a woman walking a dog in Central Park. She's in a spat with an African-American man. I don't think what she said was appropriate, but all of a sudden the phone comes out, it's taped. Yeah. She loses her job. He's a notorious person now, for better or worse. He feels terrible about the fact she lost her job. And so we're in a fully transparent, or as close to fully transparent world. You know, if you've read the dystopian novel by David Edgars called The Circle, Tom Hanks was in the movie. The movie stunk, but the book is quite good about how all of this transparency and all of this exposure is eliminating privacy. And so if you're in a crisis, therefore, if you're in a crisis, you have to talk to people straight and you have to talk to people intimately. You know, back in the day, the U-2 spy plane is shot down and the CIA runs into the Oval Office and they tell Dwight Eisenhower, you know, say it was a weather balloon. And he says, well, suppose they, you know, they got the pilot. Well, how could they get the pilot? The plane was 60,000 feet in the air. They shot it with a missile. Okay, well, I got a summit with Khrushchev next month. Yeah, no, it's fine. We're sure that the pilot is dead. Okay, so he gets out there. He gives this little standard speech. This Francis Gary Powers shows up. The thing is canceled, and Dwight Eisenhower, who really had integrity and was really trying never to tell those types of lies, is caught in a fairly big lie. Now you got a president that lives the big lie every single day. And so everyone on this call is sort of zoomed out from him. They're like, okay, it doesn't matter what he's saying. It's sort of ridiculous. So you can't trust him in a crisis. Anthony Fauci has credibility. You know he's going to talk to you straight in a crisis. He's going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so for me, we're in such an environment now that it really requires that there's no way I'm going to connect with you. If I take out a sheet of paper, you ask me a question, and I read to you canned notes, and I blah 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 blah, your eyes are going to glaze over. You're like, this guy's full of shit. Sorry, that was my first curse. You guys can keep track of the curses, Thanos. Keep track of the curses. But the point I'm making is you got to be authentic now. And so in that crisis, what the president needed to say is, okay, listen, here's what's going on. SARS and MERS, this is how they handled it. Country's not ready for it. I actually don't blame him for not shutting the country down that first day. I don't think the country could have handled it, frankly. They would have thought, what is he, crazy? He needed to condition the country. He needed to culturally get them ready. He needed to explain to the nation's citizens, okay, listen, this is an invisible enemy. This is what it's doing. This is what the South Koreans are doing. Singaporeans are doing this. They saw MERS and SARS. MERS and SARS didn't get to our shores. This is coming. And we got to batten down the hatches. And this is why we got to do this. And if we do this, we're going to save this many lives. And if we do the tracing and the testing, we'll be able to get the economy open. And the people that are not feeling well, they'll stay home. But he didn't do that. You know, he is a full-blown lunatic. And so he lied about it. He suppressed it. He doesn't want to test the people. He's made that very clear. He can't make it any clearer. He says if he tests the people, then it becomes a mark against him. That means there's more cases. But that slowed down the ability for the economy to open.
Regardless, Anthony, regardless of what you think, I think, or anybody in this room thinks about what the president is doing and his administration, there is always a communication strategy behind it. It might be working, it might not be working. But before getting too deep into this, I want you to give an idea to everyone who is watching us now. How is the White House structure in its communication department? How does the communication flow in the White House? And I'm not only talking about this specific administration. I'm talking about how many people are working in the communication department. What is the structure? So everything.
Well, I mean, there was a, you know, if you go to CNN, if you type in Scaramucci communications plan, I wrote a 7 or 8 page plan that I was going to execute for the president prior to my firing. And it was based on some traditional concepts, and it was based on some concepts that I was going to tailor for him because he's more, let's face it, he's different from the other presidents. But if you want to talk about a more traditional model, the traditional model is the president's got the bully pulpit. He has an opportunity to control elements of the news cycle that day. And if the White House is operating efficiently, it can operate as a broadcast center. You have 14 or 19 different departmental agencies. You could coordinate with them. They could be like your regional offices on a news network, and the White House can be the world news headquarters. And then you could create a symphony of activity among those people. And what I had said to the president, you got to start early in the morning because You may digest your news on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, but the average American, trust me, the average American, my mom and dad, they're getting their news from the local news. And so if you start early in the morning and get the president in a position where he can make news or he can get a positive message about whatever he wants to talk about, that gets on the evening local news in the 50 states, he's winning. Okay, and if you're coordinated with the other groups, whether it's Justice or Treasury and you're, okay, here's how we're going to operate the news cycle today. Think about Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. That's what they do. That would be a very good model. But that's not what happens. What happens with President Trump is he's the communications director. And he is really the press secretary. And he doesn't like anybody getting any credit. There's one spotlight. It's on him. The two worst things you can hear from President Trump is, you're getting more famous than me. You're going to get fired in 48 hours. And then the second thing you can hear is, oh, I read a paper. It said President Kelly or President Bannon or President somebody, and he doesn't like it. So, I can tell you the number of people. It doesn't really matter. He wakes up in the morning, decides what he wants to do, decides what he wants to say. He may start on Twitter at 1 a.m. You don't know what he's going to do. And then you're there and you're saying, okay, how am I going to handle this? I was only there for 11 days. But on one of those days, you can go look it up. He's tweeting about the transgender policies of the American military. So he decides to abolish the transgender policies of the American military without telling the Pentagon, without telling the Secretary of Defense, without notifying the communications area. And he just sends out the tweet. So now I walk into the Oval Office. He looks at me and says, so what'd you think of that? That was a great idea, right? I mean, enough of that. Why do we have to spend that money? Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, I don't think it's a great idea. What do you mean you don't think it's a great idea? Why? What's that?
That kind of becomes a communication crisis for the rest of
I'm like, why? Well, first of all, why are you doing that? You got so many fish that we got to fry here. This is a tiny minnow. They've been debating this for 25 years in the Pentagon, starting with the first week of the Bill Clinton administration. They came up with a policy. We're talking about $7 million to handle the transgender situation in the American military. And, whether you like it or not, 13% of the population is gay. Thanos knows I'm a gay rights activist. I was literally the only one in the room. I mean, Mike Pence and I, you should have heard those conversations. And so why are we doing this? And then he looks at me. Now he's pissed at me because I'm not agreeing with him. And then he's lighting me up. But, I didn't really care. And that's another reason why I got fired, because if you're an independent thinker, and I built my own business and made my own money from scratch. I mean, I'm a blue collar kid from Long Island. So I'm going to tell you the truth. And you may not like what I'm saying, or you may like what I'm saying. But, Steve Mnuchin told me, hey, they fired you because they couldn't control you. He didn't like that. The people that are working for him now in the comms department, he's comfortable with them. He can control them. They'll do what he wants. They'll lie for him. He'll say something ridiculous and they'll get out there and support it. I wasn't doing that.
And we saw changes recently in the communications department at the White House. We saw a new spokesperson. Stephanie Grisham actually went back to the First Lady's office. And we got the press briefings back. We went through 9 months without any press briefing.
I like her. Kayleigh does a good job. I like her. She's very smart. She's a gentle woman. She's a nice person. Mm-hmm. She's got a lot of class. She's going to have a tough time because he's going to move the goalposts on her.
What do you think is the strategy behind this change, Anthony? Why do you think they decided to go with those changes, bring people from the Pentagon, bring Kelly now?
I think that, look, Stephanie, I know a long time. I worked with her on the Romney campaign. I think that she didn't feel comfortable carrying that podium. So you're standing at the podium. You're not in a fishbowl. You're in the largest aquarium in the world. There's 2,000, 3,000 White House correspondents, and they're firing questions left and right. Stephanie didn't feel comfortable with that, And I think that she also knew that the president was grading syllable by syllable of that. He happens to like Kayleigh. He's tweeting about Kayleigh. He likes Kayleigh. Kayleigh doesn't threaten him. Kayleigh doesn't, he's a remarkably, for his achievements in life, he's a remarkably insecure person. So, and so she doesn't threaten him. So therefore he likes her, but trust me, he's going to move the goalposts on her, and there's going to be a problem because he does it to everybody. The person that's figured it out the best is Steven. Steven Mnuchin has figured out, let me get the hell out of the guy's way. Let me do what I'm good at. Let me keep under the water. Let me go on TV selectively and only related to certain obscure policies. And let me sound as boring as possible on television, so I'm not creating any fanfare around myself. And that's worked for Steven, And so if he was a different personality or more forward or more forceful, bang, he'd be gone, because the president doesn't like him.
I found it very interesting that you talked about Gordon Gekko, and your book titled Goodbye Gordon Gekko, How to Find Your Fortune Without Losing Your Soul, was written around 2010. For those who don't know Gordon Gekko, he is the fictional character in the movie Wall Street, played by Michael Douglas. And he sort of became the symbol in popular culture for unrestrained greed, where his signature line was greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Why did you decide to write this book? Why Gordon Gekko? And, how to find your fortune without losing your soul in a post-COVID world where everyone feels threatened in a way. It seems like this is very relevant today as it was in 2010.
Well, listen, I got the title from Oliver Stone. I don't know if you remember Oliver, but he directed Wall Street 1 and he directed Wall Street 2. I was writing a book, and I didn't have a title for it, but I was writing a book because, maybe I'm self-important. I was basically thinking about my life at age 45. I wrote the book in 2010. I was like, okay, to get to where I've gotten to, a lot of things had to fall into place, and there were some disasters that happened that I had to fix. And, I wrote very honestly in the book about my travails. I didn't have parents that understood a corporate setting, or they worked in a, white collar or white shoe environment. So, my first time in an office building was a callback interview to Goldman Sachs. And I wrote in the book about walking into the Charles Hotel. I was being interviewed at Harvard Law School. I had a polyester suit on. I had a polyester shirt on, a polyester tie. I was fully flammable for my first meet. They struck a match, I would have caught on fire. And it was the best clothing that I had that my parents bought for me. And I'm in the meeting and I'm talking to these guys from Goldman, and the partner gets up. He walks me to the door. He puts his arm around me. He says, hey, you're a smart kid, but you are the worst dressed person that we have ever met. I can't bring you to Goldman Sachs dressed like this. You got the black Guido tie on, and your shirt's shining. You gotta go get some natural fiber. And I was mortified. I was bright red. I remember going back. I was 23 years old. I called my parents. My mother was like, "What is that guy crazy?" You know how mothers are, right? You look great. But I didn't look great. I looked like shit. Okay, so I had to go to Brooks Brothers. I had to buy some suits, and I had to get down to Goldman Sachs looking differently than how I started that interview. And so to me, Goodbye Gordon Gekko was a rite of passage story. So I got a phone call from Oliver Stone. He had seen me on CNBC, and he said he wanted me in the movie. And I said, okay, no problem. And I went and had lunch with him and Michael Douglas, who played Gordon Gekko, and Ed Pressman, who was the producer. And we were sitting around at the table, and they wanted to talk to me about the current Wall Street. They'd done the movie 22 years later. And so we were talking about it. And then I said, listen, I've written this, tell you what, give me your script. Here's my manuscript. And I've written this book. And so Oliver read the book, and he agreed to endorse the back of it. And Josh Brolin endorsed it. And he came up with the title. Because if you read the book, and maybe you've read part of it or some of it, it's like an honest appraisal of how to keep your morals and keep your principles. You don't have to be that jerk. You don't have to be that arrogant, self-centered, super self-important jerk. You can be a good person. Am I going to be the richest person? No. I write in the book, if you're asking for you have to leave money on the table for your partners. If you're asking for the last dollar in a deal, well, okay, you may get the last dollar, but like Li Ka-shing said to me, the property tycoon, you'll get the last dollar, but then you'll be unhappy because you should have asked for $2. And it's never enough for you. And you create this cycle of mania in your personality. So for me, I wanted to write that book about being true to yourself. I've got 3 adult children. One of them is at Stanford Business School. He's graduating through a Zoom app in June because he can't go to a graduation. My daughter went to Brown University and she's now acting. She's been put out of work by this because she was on Broadway. And so she's writing some songs, but she's out of work. But, she's dreaming about that. I have a 20-year-old lunatic that is in LA right now. He dropped out of school and he is a leading music videographer in the rap community. If you go and look up Mooch World, calls himself Mooch. If you look up Mooch World on Twitter, he's got some of the top music videos in the country, if not the world right now, that he himself is creating and directing, and he's bossing around these all-star rappers at the age of 20. So why is that? Because as a dad, I told them, hey man, not a dress rehearsal, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive, right? I mean, that's Mel Brooks's line. Steve Jobs said at Stanford in 2005, what are you doing? You're either going to do what you want to do or you're going to regret not doing it. And so for my kids, I'd say, hey, you want to do that? I'm 100% for it. You're going to be dead before you know it. So go enjoy yourself, live your passion. So, you're in journalism for a reason. You picked it for a reason. Intellectual curiosity, something. If you're in it for the wrong reason, and some of you maybe are in it for the wrong reason, go do something else. I watch some of these guys on CNBC. They're all like, some of them are like hapless, and they are like billionaire wannabes. And then there's some of them I see, they're journalists, and I say, hey, what did you want to do as a kid? Well, I wanted to be a sportscaster, but I'm not a sportscaster. I'm sportscasting the news for money.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that person's in the right job. The other person is like a jealous freak. You should shut up and go do what you really want to do. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the point. That's the point of Goodbye, Gordon Gekko.
Yeah, and it brings me to my next question, really, is this elusive American dream that we often talk about for our international correspondents and our international viewers right now. A lot of things will change post-COVID, and I want to get your views on that. But, as a first-generation American myself with immigrant parents, you were the first in your generation to graduate from Harvard, Italian-American family. These were the bedrocks of the American dream at some point. Right now we have COVID class of 2020 hashtagging. We have people that are concerned with what's going to happen next. We have foreign correspondents in our situation, let's say, are coming to the United States to make a new life for themselves. And they see that, COVID and this post-COVID world is really making this American dream maybe another story, not in terms of Goodbye, Gordon Gekko. The foundations are there. The originality, being true to yourself, hardworking, those are all there. But it seems some aspects of it will change.
But you got to be patient. You have to take it in the context, a historical context. You should read John Barry's book, The Great Influenza. It reads like a thriller. It discusses the Spanish flu pandemic, which frankly was way worse than this because they didn't really understand it. 750,000 Americans died, 60 or so million people died globally. There was no Federal Reserve to stimulate the economy. You were coming out of the First World War, and yet the countries and the society recovered, and we went off and created the Roaring 20s, and we industrialized America, and you had the production of Model A cars and the infrastructure built for the highway system, and electricity was meeting the rural areas. And so, you have so much of that going on right now, but you have to have some perspective and you have to have some patience. When I think of my grandmother, she got here, she was 18, she couldn't work. Why couldn't she work? There was so much discrimination. There were signs in the windows. It said, no Italians need apply, Nina. That also stood for the Irish. So she would go into a store shop. They say, no, you're Italian, you can't come in here. So she ended up as a maid. She was working as a maid. She was turning people's beds. And so, you know, when I'm in a hotel room, I always drop a $20 bill, or depends on how many days, I drop a $100 bill, because it could be somebody's grandmother. You know, I mean, is that really going to break my bank by doing something like that? But it'll send a nice karmic message to that person. My point is that, like, she isn't thinking about her actualization of her life. She wasn't thinking about, oh God, I came to America as a foreign correspondent and I'm screwed now for 18 months because of the COVID crisis. She's like, I got to get to work, man. I got to shut up, and I got to stop complaining, and I got to go clean this person's house so that my children can have a life in America, and maybe my grandson will go to Harvard someday. You see what I'm saying? And so for me, I try to tell people, relax. You know, our civilization, our generation, through no fault of our own, or maybe through fault of our own. You could read the book Spillover about these zootropic illnesses, okay, and how we're encroaching upon the animal kingdom, and so we're going to get more and more pandemics. But I'm just saying, we didn't cause it. You and I didn't cause it, and so therefore, but we have to live in it. But apply some historical context and apply some perspective to it. And remember, it's not just you. You know, there's 4 billion other people that are being affected by it. But I'm telling you, if you think about it the right way, you'll come out stronger, you'll come out better, you'll be sharper, you'll be more on your game. There's someone listening to this saying, you know what, I hate journalism and I'm going to quit it. And this is a big pivot point for me. And someday I'm going to say, you know what, I left journalism because of the COVID-19 thing, and I did what I really wanted to do. And there's another person here saying, you know what, I'm going to start the next Huffington Post in the middle of this. I'm going to corral 10 of my friends, and we're going to write about certain things that people really want to understand, because there is so much information out there, Susan, but there is a lack of understanding. And so maybe there's an opportunity to create a blog post or a new Huffington Post where you're like, okay, this is what's really going on. This is the apparatus of the Russian government. This is the apparatus of the American government. This is how America is helping you. This is America is hurting you. This is what the Russians are doing. This is what the Chinese are doing with these stupid concentration camps. This is what the Chinese Communist Party is about. This is why Hong Kong matters. All of a sudden, because people don't know. You know, I'm with clients sometimes, and I mentioned the word quantitative easing. These people are super sophisticated financial advisors. Down deep, they don't know what it is. So I take 10 seconds and I lay it out for them, and I explain to them what it is without making them feel stupid, without being pedantic, without being arrogant. I just know that they don't know, so I just casually mention it, as I know you know this, but it's worth repeating. You know, this is what the Fed is doing, and this is why the Fed is doing it. And all of a sudden, the person then calls me, and they're comfortable with me. They'll ask me another question. You know, and so here's the other thing. Like, you have to be willing to not only take risk, but you have to expose your vulnerabilities. The minute you expose your vulnerabilities, all of a sudden people are like, okay, he's just another human being. I'm going to go a little easier on him. It's very hard to demonize you or a person after you meet them, or after you've had a real heart-to-heart conversation with them. It's very easy to demonize people that you see in the paper or the news, or you characterize them a certain way, or some journalist is winning the Pulitzer Prize. You want to stab their eyeball out with an ice pick because you're not winning it. You know, I mean, but you don't know their whole life story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Anthony, I have one question for you before we open the stage to a lot of our guests who are posing questions here. Throughout the years, you've been a successful entrepreneur and you are still in the same field, but you've been also involved in politics through your position at the White House. My question is, turning the clock back and trying to see what are your mistakes that you've made over the years on how you manage your personal branding and your personal image. Are there any lessons that you've learned for yourselves?
Yeah, sure.
And also, did you make any, for example, mistakes on how you promote yourself in the field of politics and how this impacted, for example, probably your career in the entrepreneurship and business sector? We would like to hear your of your experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, a very clinical, objective.
And also,
go ahead, Thanos, I'm sorry.
Wife, what does she think that you made as mistakes throughout this process, in case that she has different opinion from you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've made so many mistakes. You don't have enough time for all the mistakes that I've made. I mean, we could go for 5 days, but you know, the more broad brush mistakes is I just want to apply context, right? We're talking about Goodbye Gordon Gekko. So you got to go to my family of origin, my birth, the family I lived in, the blue collar nature of the neighborhood I grew up in, the lack of education in the neighborhood, the lack of education for my parents. And then you got to see the hustle. Okay, moving from there into Tufts, having no money to pay for Tufts, figuring out how to borrow the money and do that, then getting into Harvard. My mother thought it was Hartford. She had no idea it was Harvard. I was like, she thought we were going to Connecticut. I'm like, Ma, we're going back up to Boston. I mean, she had no clue. Then I had to hustle that and figure out a way to make that money, pay that off. Then I'm at Goldman Sachs, which is like landing like an alien coming in from Mars, not really understanding anything because I didn't have any of that background. And so we're mentioning politics. Why did I go into politics? I wrote my first check in politics to Rudy Giuliani in 1989. It was a $250 check. Why? I didn't have a network. And so there I was working as a high net worth financial advisor, and I had to go call on rich people, but I didn't know any rich people. So I said, let me make a check to Rudy Giuliani. I'll go to some of those political events. There's got to be some rich people there. And so I made my way, and I used the political fundraising system to create a network for myself. I was completely politically agnostic. I didn't have a political opinion or care about politics other than the fact that it was helping me grow my business. So when I got to Barack Obama, he had gone to law school with me. And so I didn't really know him in law school. My buddy said, hey, we're going to a fundraiser, Senator Obama. I want to introduce you to Senator Obama. I said, okay, yeah, no problem. I'll happily meet him. You got to bring a check. I said, okay, no problem. I bring the check. I'm meeting Senator Obama. I said, hey, we didn't really know each other in law school. I said, but you know, I got a big check here in my wallet. I'm going to hand it to you, but I want to lie to people and tell everybody that I knew you in law school. He laughs and he says, well, if you double the amount of the check, we can take it back to Hawaii. Right? It was very funny. I doubled the amount of check. I wasn't political. I didn't care if it was a Republican or a Democrat. It was helping me build my network. So you have to apply context to my mistakes, okay? You cannot, Thanos, you cannot get to where I am without making gigantic mistakes. It's impossible because a lot of the shots I'm taking are in the dark. You know, I can't even see the target and I'm shooting, right? So my big mistake, and I told you this, and I've said this before, is don't put your ego into things, because the minute your ego's in, your pride and your ego and your emotion, when that's in, your intelligence is going to go down. The emotions are going up, the intelligence is going down. So what happened to me is when President Trump won, he said to me, I want you to go work for me. I laughed. I said, I don't want to go work for you. And then because I was hosting Wall Street Week, I had my own business. And they said, no, you got to come work for me. And he was offering me the OPL position. You guys probably don't remember that. To be like his chief networking officer. You know, my wife, you know, probably hates him almost as much as Melania hates him. I mean, she probably doesn't hate him as much as Melania hates him, but it's like close, right? And so she didn't want me to do it. And so that was a very big mistake. That was not being true to myself. And that was my pride and my ego. The notion that I could go work in the White House, I had to live the good part of the American dream, and the naivete to think I could fit into a political system of political hacks and political operatives when I had never done that before. That was a colossal mistake, okay? Then I made the mistake with the reporter, and you've got a lot of anti-Trump bias out there, so the media collapsed on that, and they caricatured me, and they branded me a certain way. And, you know, I mean, that's a mistake. It's unavoidable due to the first mistake. You see, the first mistake was a domino into the second mistake, right? So I can't control what Bill Maher is going to say about me or Seth Meyers. Seth Meyers said something the other day. It was actually very funny. Somebody said it to me. They said, you know, the such and such lasted 13 days. That reminds me of Anthony Scaramucci. He only lasted 11. You remember when I was teasing about Anthony Scaramucci? Well, now it turns out I'd probably vote for Anthony Scaramucci. That's what Seth Meyers said, making a joke, right? But the point I'm making is that I couldn't control any of that. I took those risks, didn't understand the game I was playing, got annihilated, and big deal. Now, here's the most important thing of the story. If you make mistakes, and I have made a ton of them, the number one thing you have to do is forgive yourself. And trust me, you are not really living if you're not making mistakes. Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing yourself. So I don't wake up in the morning and say, Jesus Christ, I made all these mistakes. Let me kick myself in the butt for saying what I said to that reporter or for getting fired from the White House. I don't do that. I get up in the morning, take the millstone of regret off my neck and go to work. So if you're saying to me, wow, you hurt your business and you hurt your reputation by going to work for Trump, yeah, that's all true. I can't control that. All I can do is be myself and go forward with who I am. I can't even regret that because all I was doing was my best at that time.
And
does that make sense?
All mistakes can be easily fixed, or all mistakes are fixable, or there are some mistakes that you cannot fix and they remain forever and they change the way of your life or career route?
There are some mistakes that you cannot fix, but my message to you on that is who cares? Who cares? Life is happening to you while you're making your life, right? You're making plans. God is laughing. Okay. If you said to me, well, if you came to me, if you were a sorcerer, you got a crystal ball and you said to me, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to graduate from Harvard. I'm 15 years old and I'm working in my uncle's motorcycle shop, changing chains on motorcycles. And, I'm trying to save money for my Camaro and I'm going to wear gold chains and drive around like a Long Island Guido. And now I'm sitting there and you come to me with a crystal ball and you say, well, listen, you're going to graduate from Harvard Law School. You're going to work at Goldman Sachs. You're going to build 2 very successful, and again, I'm not bragging, but it's just, reasonably successful hedge fund businesses. And oh, by the way, the American president is going to ask you to go work for him. And so you're going to go work in the White House, but you're going to get your ass shot up after 11 days and you're going to return to your business, but you're going to have very high name recognition. Almost every goddamn person is going to know who you are. And some of those people are going to hate your guts. And some of those people are actually going to like you. And you told me that at 15, I would have laughed. I said, come on, that's not going to happen. But here we are. And my point is, enjoy the ride, man. Don't regret stuff. An entrepreneur enjoys the journey, the ups and downs of the journey, the trials and tribulations. I'm not micromanaging my image. Who cares? If you end up liking me and we end up doing business together, that's great. There's so many fish in the sea, Thanos. You don't need to own every source at the White House. You can have 5 good friends at the White House that feed you the information. You're writing the stories. You're a genius. You're not, if you're trying to get everybody to like you, forget it. It's never going to happen.
Bricio, do you have anything to add on these comments from Anthony and Susan? Do you have anything to add as a comment on what you just heard from Anthony before we open the stage to our guests?
No, without revealing my age, I'm going to say this: who cares what other people think comes with age? But
it does. It does. Yeah. I didn't. And by the way, let me say it to you this way: my grandmother used to tell us, "What other people think of you is none of your business."
Right.
I have to tell myself that every morning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't want to make it like I'm sanctimonious and I've got it all figured out. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm 56 years old. So, but you're right. As you get older, you're like, who cares? I mean, no one's thinking about you anyway, by the way. They don't give a shit about themselves. You know what I mean?
That's right.
All right, anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it. Sane advice. Very sane advice.
Thanos, I have to apologize to you because I thought this was going to be an hour. I got about 15 minutes. Is that cool?
No, it is. It's very cool. I mean, do you have enough time? Do you have some more time?
Yeah, let's take about 15 minutes. Is that cool?
Let's go ahead and say that we open the stage to some of our board members, Momoe Ban from Nikkei, Nancy Camel, Dawn Kissy is here, Alex Segura is here, and Thomas Barat also is here. Please, you're all unmuted. I would like if you can just compile all the questions together so we can facilitate the time.
Sure. Thanks so much, Thanos. My video situation. Can you hear me?
Yes, let's go
Yeah, I
with
can hear you. Yep.
Dawn, Momoe, Nancy, Alex, and Thomas.
No, I don't have anything specific. I just don't know. I wanted to thank Anthony. I live about 20 minutes away from you. You're in Manhasset, right? I think, or Port.
I am. Yeah, I grew up in Port Washington. I live in Manhasset.
Yeah, I'm in Forest Hills now, but I know those streets really well, and I totally relate to everything you spoke about, the garage, the Camaro, everything. I mean, I've got friends up and down from Great Neck to Oyster Bay, so I get it. And we're all first generation, right? And we all know that Long Island, Queens, Manhattan hustle, and I totally respect your story, your backstory about, how you gave money to Giuliani, and, you have to find that in for yourself. Because I am an entrepreneur myself. And, as a woman of color with African parents running around these media circles in New York, it's not easy. I may have a direct line to so-and-so at the Post or the Hollywood Reporter, but it really isn't easy. And it's the guy you met at the gas station, in Great Neck North that may end up helping you 2 weeks down the line. You just don't know.
I 100%, and there's no use in complaining about it. Of
course not.
When I was at Goldman, one of the partners said, "Hey man, trust me, these guys want you to landscape their yards. They don't want you running their money." And I looked at the guy and said, "Okay, what are you going to do, right?" That's an Italian stereotype. But I never complained about it, and I just kept going. You follow what I'm saying? So you can never play the victim. That's the number one lesson.
Momoe Ban, Nancy Campbell, quick questions, please.
Yes, this is Momoe Ban. Thank you very much, Mr. Scaramucci. It was great, your comment, and it's very inspiring. My question is, if you were still in the White House now as a communication director.
I would have taken a cyanide pill, so of course I would be long gone from the White House. I mean, I'm sure there was a cyanide pill somewhere in the office I could have taken. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so my question is, what would you do to deal with this COVID-19 situation, which anybody at the White House have not done yet?
Well, you would have to, it's not going to happen, but you would have to deploy the forces of the American government to make the testing as widespread as possible. And you would have to adopt best practices from Asia. And a president that has a quote unquote American first strategy is never going to do that. I'm the type of person where I don't have to invent the things. I'm not an inventor. I would rather have the best practices or the best ideas come to me. You see what I'm saying? So I would immediately move for contact tracing and testing in the hottest spots in the United States. And then after that, you could really have a very good understanding of how you can open the country more safely. Right now, you're opening the country with a lot of unknowns, and there's no reason to put infected people out in the population with uninfected people, but you could get that information, and then you could lead and explain to people that are infected, okay, listen, even if we have to pay for your housing for 14 days, or we'll give you a stipend to stay home, incentivization or something, we're going to make you do that. So the White House is not going to do that. So you're going to be in a Wild West situation when it opens, and you're going to have to protect yourself. And so be careful, because you're going to be in a pre-vaccine economy and then a post-vaccine economy. And so it's going to go slower than people want, because these guys are listening to a maniac that is a one-dimensional strategic thinker. And so he's so insecure, he could never take an idea from somebody other than himself.
Nancy Campbell and Thomas Barat, your questions.
Nancy first. Ladies first.
Thomas, go ahead.
Mr. Scaramucci, I have a question about the President's communication practices. In March, the American e-government company did a research.
Thomas, we cannot hear you well. We can't hear you. Brisha, do you see the question from?
Yes, I think. Thomas. Unfortunately, we cannot. Your sound wasn't great, but I've seen your question on the chat, and I would like to ask this question to Anthony Scaramucci. Thomas wrote, according to Edelman research, people don't usually trust mainstream media and national media. Only 19% answered the question that they trust, and only 1% responded that they trust Facebook and Twitter. What do you think about this information? these results?
Well, that's a problem. And remember, the president is also fueling that, right, with the whole fake news chant and the disinformation. So what I would say to journalists, and I said this in that op-ed I wrote last year, be careful. Make sure you triple check your homework, triple check your sourcing, so that you don't fall into the soup and you get guys like President Trump yelling fake news, fake news. Journalists make mistakes. You know, Thanos remembers a situation where two journalists were writing a story about me and the Russian investigation, and they made an allegation against me that wasn't true. And I said, okay, guys, that's not true. You're not fact checking enough. And they didn't check the facts. They wrote the story. I had to call Jeff Zucker, and I said, Jeff, look, we're friends a long time. That story's not true. Call Mitch McConnell. He'll tell you that I'm not under Senate investigation. He runs the Senate. And so they called Mitch McConnell. He said that I wasn't under investigation, and they had to bleach bit the story and drop the story. Now, I didn't sue them for libel or slander or anything. They apologized to me. I accepted the apology. But if I was a different type of person, I'd be yelling fake news, fake news, fake news. You see what I mean? And so we have to get better leadership in our country that develops a better rapport with journalism and offers that level of respect. That doesn't mean we got to like each other all the time. It doesn't mean that they have to write positive things about the politician. The politician should be a man or a woman enough to allow themselves to be lit up a little bit, you know, and because we don't have that anymore, that's where all of that caustic stuff is coming from.
Okay, good. Thank you, Anthony. Always articulate and amusing. Good combination. Nancy Camel here. I remember you mentioned 2008 crisis. At that time, the government decided that they were going to do an initiative, and I was appointed as a corporate ambassador to go over to the Middle East. And what we really were focusing on is what you were talking about, which is that opportunity, that disaster actually as a Chinese symbol is the same as opportunity. And so in order to transmute one into the other, you really just need to take control of it. Speaking of taking control, I would like to ask you about the prediction for the election. I was told by someone in the government that they actually had in place a plan to physically remove Trump if he lost the election, because they felt there was a possibility he would not acknowledge it and would not leave the White House.
So you're asking me what my prediction is, or will Trump do something like that if he's reelected? Or both? Probably both. Okay, so the first thing I would say to you is I lived in Trump world, and so you're 160 days out from the election. That's like 500 years in Trump world. That's like going back to Christopher Columbus. So if anybody tells you what they think is going to happen, they don't know what's going to happen, because I was with the president on the Access Hollywood day, October 7th. The flash polling had him down 12 or 13% that weekend, and a month later he won the election. So you don't know what's going to happen. And I would just submit to everybody on this call, where you were 90 days ago is a very different spot than you are right now, stuck in your house. And where you're going to be in 90 days is going to be a very different spot. So 160, 170 days out, we don't know what's going to happen. I think he's going to lose. I'm going to answer the question. I think he's going to lose, because he's got the Republicans thinking he's Ronald Reagan and he won like in a 1984 landslide, 49 states, but he really only won the election by 150,000 votes. And he has disaffected women above the age of 50. Go look through the polling data and go to Republican pollsters. Forget about the Democrats. Go to the ones that are skewing towards Trump, and you'll see he's got an inimical disaster on his hands, which is causing him to spin like a whirling dervish and causing him to do all this nonsense that he's doing right now. So I think he's going to lose. Joe Biden is beating his ass in from the basement. I just want you to think about how difficult that's got to be on President Trump's personality. Can he turn it around? Don't rule the guy out, because he is the incumbent. He has the powers of the presidency. But you asked me that question. Now, let's say he wins, or let's say he loses, and now he says, hey, I'm not leaving, and I've got a plan in place. Like, there's no chance of that happening, because he is universally hated. You guys are journalists. He's hated by people inside the White House. He's hated by people outside the White House. He's hated by the American military. He's hated by the State Department. You tell me the group other than William Barr that's in the tank for Trump. Okay, so there's nowhere for him to go to say, hey, I'm standing here and I got the American military behind me. I'm taking over the American government and creating an autocracy. So that's not going to happen. I do not see that happening. And so therefore, he's got good enough instincts where he won't push that.
Anthony, I would like to do a follow-up on the previous question. You mentioned the fake media. Usually the president calls fake media to media outlets that are critical with his administration. Did you guys get any direction when you were the communications director at the White House? Did you guys get any direction from the president to enforce or spread this such as a media strategy, the fake media thing? Is there such a thing? It's a media strategy. Is there fake media? What was your experience?
Well, first of all, it's 100% a media. It was 100% a strategy. Steve Bannon came up with the strategy. He announced it at CPAC in February or March of 2017. He declared the press the enemy of the people. He said the press was the opposition party. When I got to the White House, my first meeting with the president was in the study off the Oval Office. It was him and I alone. He said to me, what the hell happened to me? I had such a great relationship with the media, 45 years, media people like me. What the hell happened? I said, what do you mean what the hell happened? You declared war on the media. You let Steve Bannon declare war on the media. I said, I can totally fix this for you, but you got to calm down and be patient. He said, okay, you go out and do the press conference today. And so go back and look at my press conference from 3 years ago. The first people I called on was CNN. The CNN hadn't been called on in 4 months. John Spicer was told by Steve Bannon not to call on CNN. They were the enemy of the people. I got to the press podium. I called on CNN. Sarah Murray was sitting in there for James Acosta, and I took the question. I was trying to send a message. We're going to calm this thing down, and that we believe in the First Amendment, and we believe in the interaction with the press, that healthy debate, and being held accountable because we're in power. And so that lasted 11 days. And then I got shot out like a cannon, like a Austin Powers villain. And they went right back to that strategy. Okay, because that strategy, remember what I said at the beginning of this call, that strategy works with the president's base. The president's base is a disaffected blue-collar worker. It's not like my dad that had an aspirational working class family. These people have lost wages and real earnings power. They're desperational working class. And so they don't like the establishment. They don't like the media. And they feel like the system is rigged against them. So when Trump's out there bashing the system and the institutions of the system, they like it. And that's why he does it. I got to go. So let's take one more question. I apologize for that because I have something going on here at the house.
Vanessa Zaglitz from Washington, D.C., a foreign journalist. Alex Raufoglu, very quick.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fonseco, very quick question. And Alex Segura. Let's combine.
Yeah, thank you. I actually do want to follow up with where you just left. Thank you so very much for those comments about press. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yes. So, most of us come from the countries with poor, human rights, press freedom records. So, journalists in the third world countries have traditionally looked to the U.S., right, for an example, and for support. And America has always been a nation where reporters could bring the presidents down, right, and could be, given prizes for that and never get imprisoned. And the government, administrations after administrations, they would speak out for press freedom. So my question is, when the president calls the journalists enemies of the people, how does it embolden foreign dictators? Thank you very much.
I didn't hear the last part of it. What was the last part of it, Thomas?
So how do foreign dictators get emboldened by the U.S. president's attack against the press freedom?
Yeah, well, I think I understand the question. Listen, this is an anomaly. He's a anti-institutionalist. He doesn't understand the Constitution. He's never taken constitutional law, and he doesn't understand the sacred nature of that document or the sacred nature of the American Republic. And he's hurt the standing of America with his big mouth because, people look to America as that beacon of hope, that beacon of freedom. And so, him acting the way he does, it hurts the press internationally, gives greater license for dictators to hurt the press with great impunity. And he's put pressure on American journalists, God forbid one of the American journalists or one of the foreign journalists working here in America gets hurt as a result of this sort of nastiness and this sort of not, poor behavior. It's almost like if Roy Cohn had a baby with Joe McCarthy, it was like Donald Trump, and it got adopted by Steve Bannon. I mean, that's what we're living with. Okay. And so we have to beat the guy, because we have to learn something from his campaign and something from his presidency, that we have to hold sacred the Republic of the United States. And so if we don't do that, more pain and more trauma is going to come to journalism.
Susan? We don't.
I think you're on mute.
I want to thank you. I just want to thank you so much, Anthony, for that time and for always supporting us. I know you're very busy. We hope to talk to you soon. And thank you, everyone. On Facebook.
Anytime, guys. Thank you. I'm sorry I have to leave. I just promised my wife I would be out of here at 6:30 because I've been, unfortunately, in a crisis. I've been working every day from 7 a.m. on. But I appreciate you guys inviting me. Thank you. And let's stay in touch. And go do what you really want to do. And if this is what you really want to do, be bigger and be bolder. And you'll be very happy, because at the end of the day, it's just a process, And don't be too sore at yourself if things go wrong if you're taking a lot of risk.
Thank
All right,
you.
I think that's the message. Okay?
Thanks so much.
All right, God bless, guys. Okay,
Take care.
Good luck.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.